I'm here with Spencer. Yep, Spencer, hi. Wave to the people. So Spencer is the director and programmer of the upcoming RPG Fallen Legion Revenants. And I'm so excited to have you be here today. Spencer, I know that you must be really excited because the game is coming out soon, and I know that game development is a super long journey.
Yeah, we started working on Fallen Legion Revenants pretty much right after Rise to Glory came out, so it's been a little over 2 years now to make this game.
Oh wow, that's pretty good. So before we dive into the game, though, first tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so my company, YummyYummyTummy, we want to make some really interesting game worlds that aren't really seen, and we want to try to experiment with new mechanics. And specifically with Fallen Legion, we want to have really intense battles and really intense decisions, and kind of the mix between interesting politics and interesting combat situations is kind of like the soul of a Fallen Legion game.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. So, growing up, Spencer, were you a big video game fan at all?
Of course. I was playing video games since I was 5 years old. My first system was the Famicom, and I grew up playing lots of RPGs, but also games like Mega Man and Contra, Zelda, and Genesis titles too, like Sonic and Shining Force, Phantasy Star.
Wow, Shining Force and Phantasy Star. That makes me so happy. So we must be of a similar age, because I remember all of these games too, and these are all the right answers, I have to say. So I have to ask this because everyone asks this question, but how did you get into the games industry? What was that process like for you?
I probably came in a really different way. I used to run this website called Siliconera. It was a video game website. I was the original creator of it, and I had this project in my dorm room, basically, for when I started running the site. And then I love doing interviews and meeting so many creators. I was really, really fortunate to talk to many of my idols, when I was a kid, and I got a lot of game inspiration from them. I was thinking, man, all these creators made these wonderful worlds. One day I want to do this. One day I want to do it too.
Right, so this was kind of like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of operation, where you're literally running out of your dorm room, but just sort of chasing that dream and getting that initiative going. Yeah.
And then, Siliconera got to be a pretty big community size, and then now it's time to pass the torch on and to do something else. And now, I want to be the one to create worlds that I think people will be interested to experiment in. So,
now that, your current role has borne fruit and you've got these awesome games, going on, tell us a little bit about the Fallen Legion series, because I think it's very unique. It's not like other series necessarily.
Yeah, man, when we started making it, I wanted to take mechanics that were I love Japanese role-playing games, but I didn't want to do something that was just another Dragon Quest or another Final Fantasy. I wanted to try to take some mechanics that aren't seen as much, and since I play a lot of fighting games, I want to try to incorporate some of that into a battle system. But I also think what's interesting is usually in a Japanese style role-playing game, you're in these towns, and there are probably a lot of political intrigue going on in the background, but you're all the way out in a field or in a cave fighting slimes, while there's probably a lot of other things going on in the world. So with a Fallen Legion game, we want to show the other sides, what's happening while this other character is battling. So we kind of want to switch perspectives back and forth. And in the first game, you're running your kingdom from the background. You're making these decisions, and you're being a leader, or a political leader. And Revenants would take that to the next step, where you're actually inside the castle, and you're, I guess, depending on your choices, making decisions that can change the fates of other characters.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about some of the new gameplay features and story features in Fallen Legion Revenants?
Yeah, the game takes place in this miasma-covered world, and below, they're all like on the ground. They're all these beasts mutated by this like mystical plague, and the last like humans alive that are not infected by it are in this like floating castle called Welkin. And Lucian, he's a junior politician there, and he's trying to like plot a rebellion to to take this castle away from the tyrant that runs it, Ivor. So he finds this book that allows him to bring weapons to life, and he works with Rowena, who's a spirit. She's a ghost, and she was executed by Ivor, and she's fighting to free her son, who's in prison, who Ivor imprisoned.
Now, do you have to play the other Fallen Legion games in order to understand this one, or is this something that fans can just sort of dive into and try out for themselves?
You can definitely dive into it and try out for yourself. There's some Easter eggs that we put in that if you play the first ones, like you'll be like, oh, that's interesting. But it's set in the same world, but they're like 1,000 years apart.
So the first game was actually based on the French Revolution, which I think is super interesting. And now the new game is based on the 1918 pandemic, which I find fascinating because we're currently in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. So can you tell us a little bit about the 1918 pandemic and why that was the inspiration for Fallen Legion Revenants?
It's really surreal to talk about because, like, I think what I love about JRPGs is you have a group of scrappy heroes coming together to take down a big bad, and like through their teamwork, their perseverance, there's going to be a victory. And the situations are so fantastical, but they're not necessarily something that you would see in everyday life. So I was thinking, what have we, with a Fallen Legion game, we want to think about like what have we seen in everyday life that could be more fantastical in like a JRPG world, and there really haven't been. At the time when we were writing this story 2 years ago, we were like, what would be really interesting if there was a JRPG that's set in a pandemic. And before this, I was studying to be a biochemist, so it comes to like a natural interest of mine. Plus, I can kind of draw upon that background. So I thought, this would be a really unique world. It's something that I could probably put together in a different way. So that's actually why the castle is in the sky, because everyone was quarantined in a very JRPG style setting. But
I could sure go for a castle in the sky right now when it comes to COVID. That would just be kind of nice, just kind of float up in the air and just be above it all until everything calms down. So for this particular game, how does this pandemic that's ravaging the world, how does it affect the gameplay, and how does it affect your story choices? Because I'm in the first few hours of the game and I've already had to make some pretty tough moral decisions.
Yeah. Well, so the idea for the miasma was actually inspired by the miasmic theory of disease. Before we had germ theory, like in the Victorian era, that was like a prevalent way people would think you could get sick from like bad air. So that was something that people were afraid of, and like that so-called bad air is on the ground. That's what's made these other creatures turn to monsters, and it's put humanity in kind of perhaps a desperate situation, because they have no way to fight against this magical disease. Their technological level is alchemy, so you can mix potions and create potions that can give you effects to protect you to give you buffs or debuffs for enemies. And since you're in this kind of like desperate situation, you might need to make some tough choices.